Welcome back, gears, to another Horde class guide. My name is Hollow Strife and we're going to be covering everything there is to the Blademaster class in Gears 5. There will be no knife trickery here, just a plain and simple guide. Let's begin. If you have seen any of my previous guides, you will know that I like to cover everything there is to all these individual classes. We are going to cover the Blademaster's loadout, the cards and perks available, and finish the video off with some build recommendations. This is one of the last classes I have left to cover, so I'm going to put a link in the top right of this video that can take you to the rest of the classes I have already done. All my guides are beginner friendly, so if you are a hardcore veteran of the series, have a little bit of patience. Let's get into it. The Blademaster is one of the melee specialist classes we have available in Gears 5, being a lot more fleshed out and diverse than the other melee classes, the Protector and Striker. You can take and deal a stupid amount of damage, able to solo carry some of the more challenging waves the game can throw at you. The Blademaster starts out with a Claw, a Gnasher, a Talon Pistol, and 2 flash grenades. Meleeing enemies is one of your best options for damage as this class, so a Breaker Mace is ideal. After that, a Gnasher is quite optimal. The Blademaster's ultimate ability is called Electro Blade, so you are going to want to get in close and personal. You will shock and stun any enemies that you melee. On its own, this ability is underwhelming, but pair it with a couple of skill cards and you can devastate entire enemy waves. Electro Blade also gives you 0 cooldown on your melee strikes, so you can melee quite quickly, improving your damage output a lot. This will last for 15 seconds, plenty of time, and has a fairly short cooldown of only 300 seconds, or 5 minutes. Let's look at the passive ability of this class. Melee and bleed kills will instantly heal you for 50% of your maximum health, and you take 30% less damage from enemy melee hits. This healing is huge for the Blademaster, as you can melee enemies, have them bleed out, and then carry on meleeing more enemies, healing every time one of them bleeds out. It's got a really good synergy with itself. That's the basic loadout for this class, so let's look at what skill cards we can play around with. But first you need to unlock these skill cards by leveling up. I've recorded how much experience all classes need to level up and put the values in this table. I show this in all of my guides. It simply breaks down each level's requirements, but if you are a returning player to Gears 5 and happen to level up Lani, the levels and experience you had for her were transferred to the Blademaster when Operation 5 came out. Skill cards are up next. There are 20 different skill cards to use for this class, so I'm going to cover each one in detail and give you the best ways to make use of each card. Up first we have Score Boost. This simply increases your score in Horde mode and gives you extra time bonuses for escape, and that's it. It's best used to go for high leaderboard ranks. Equip it or don't, it doesn't really matter at this point. Short range deflection is next. This provides some extra damage resistance when within 5 meters of an attacking enemy, but only for ballistic damage. It's most useful against grenadiers and DR1s, but can keep you alive for a little bit longer. Just use it for now. Hitting level 3 will unlock your second card slot for the Blademaster, alongside the Brawler skill card, not the class. This card was created long before the Brawler class was really a thing. Anyway, Brawler will severely increase the damage of all your melee strikes, a very important card for this class. Equip this immediately. Our next card will be unlocked when hitting level 5, Shock Chain. Damage from your Electro Blade will chain to nearby enemies, spreading your damage and crowd control. One of my favourite cards is this class, I highly recommend, so go ahead and equip this in a new card slot you also unlocked. Efficient Executioner is the next skill card for the Blademaster. Designed more so for escape mode to generate extra ammo for your teammates when you execute enemies. I wouldn't recommend it for Horde just because weapon lockers exist. Unlocking your 4th card slot at level 7, you will also unlock Shock Shield. Upon activating your Electro Blade ultimate ability, you also generate a huge stim shield, increasing your survivability. Any damage resistance you have also affects the stim, helping to keep it alive for longer. If you use this card, you can always use your ultimate as a panic button to instantly regenerate back to maximum health. The last green card for the Blademaster is Banana Clip. This increases the magazine capacity for the Talon pistol only. Again, this was clearly designed with escape in mind. I wouldn't recommend it for Horde as the Talon isn't a very powerful weapon and meleeing is much more effective. When you hit level 9, you will finally have access to all 5 card slots. Congratulations. You will also unlock Deep Pockets. This is similar to Banana Clip, increasing your total carrying capacity with all pistols, not just the Talon. Designed for escape again, but it can be used in Horde if you find yourself using pistols as a last resort. The Blademaster's first purple skill card is unlocked next, Thrill of the Hunt. Whenever you are close to bleeding enemies, you gain damage resistance and a huge amount of health regeneration. Pairing this card with your passive and perks, which I'm going to cover later, this makes you extremely difficult to take down. A must if you are going for a melee build on this class. Getting to level 11 unlocks 2 different skill cards. The first is Nimble. This increases the speed and distance that you can slide into cover, which is fairly unique. I do like the card, but I always forget that I have it equipped, so you'll be in the moment, you'll be running around meleeing enemies, and then you're going to quickly slam into cover and sit there because I expect it to take much longer than it does to slide into the cover. So it does kind of mess with my flow sometimes, but it's still a very good card. The other skill card we get is Venom Resistance. This is an escape only card, so please don't use this for Horde. It does make you tankier when you're stuck in the Ash or Venom in escape, but you don't have those elements in Horde, so it would be a waste. The Blademaster unlocks another 2 skill cards at the next level as well. On the Flank is up first. Attacking enemies from the side or behind with ballistic weapons increases the damage they do. I do occasionally use this in Horde as you can stun enemies with flashbangs or your Electro Blade, then just walk behind them and hit them with a Nasher Blast. If it doesn't one-shot them, it will deal a lot of damage, but it's also very effective at dealing with matriarchs since you kind of have to hit them in the back. Speaking of Nashers, the other skill card we get is Nasher Mastery. This increases damage and active effects with the Nasher exponentially. You can substitute this if you want to get in close and personal with a shotgun and pair it with on the flank to deal a lot of damage. I do kind of wish the Infiltrator had this card as well, but that may have been a little too overpowered on that class. Anyway, our last blue skill card for the Blademaster is Mid-Range Deflection. This just grants ballistic damage resistance from enemies that are 5 to 10 meters away. It's a very short range for this card, and the damage resistance can help if you're trying to close the distance, but I prefer short range deflection myself. I think this card would be better if it was buffed just a little bit to be 5 to 15 meters instead, but that's just my opinion. Epic Score Boost is next. Remember the original score boost you start with? This is just a higher rarity and value than that card, but does the exact same thing. Skip this one unless you are going for high leaderboard ranks. At level 15, you're going to unlock Venom Blade. This card is phenomenal in escape. It gives your melee strikes a serious amount of bleeding damage, but there's no venom in Horde, so it's completely useless here. Skip this one, but do remember it for escape. It's time to look at the first gold skill card for the Blademaster, Ambush. This gives you a decent chunk of ultimate cooldown if you kill an enemy from behind, 5 to 10% depending on the level. It can be very useful if you're getting behind something, but most enemies tend to be facing you in Horde. Making use of decoys or the Architect's hologram ultimate ability works well for this card, as enemies tend to turn away from you to fight them instead. Just make the most out of this when you get the chance, but don't try to force it. Up next is Brutal Claw. This is a decent card, but it's the only one the Blademaster has that can improve its ranged combat efficiency. I do think some of these classes needed extra cards to increase their build diversity, and the Blademaster is definitely one of them. But if you can get this card to a higher level, the amount of extra damage and active effects you get is amazing. Another defensive card is next, Energy Surge. This was definitely designed for Horde, so don't go using this in Escape. It will generate a small amount of stim every half second, so long as you are within 10 meters of an energy tap. The amount of stim isn't that much, but it generates so quickly that it can be very easy to stay alive. So long as you have at least one stim, a ballistic hit that should normally do say 40 damage to you would only take that 1 HP of stim off. Not so effective against explosives though. Our final skill card for the Blademaster is another gold skill card, and it is by far one of the best skill cards in the game in my opinion. Blade Dancer. Any melee or bleed kills you get will increase your melee damage for 15 seconds, stacking up to 200%. How this card works though, if you get say 8 melee / bleed kills, one after the other, exactly 2 seconds apart between them, your damage will build up to that 200% gradually. Then, 15 seconds after your first kill, the damage and stacks start to fade, with the next ones fading exactly 2 seconds after the last, if that makes sense. In short, the stacks rise and fall independently, not all at once. Regardless, use this card if you are going for a melee build because it's just a lot of damage. It's time to look at perks next. All classes in Gears 5 will have access to 4 different perks in Horde mode. You will need to spend energy to level up these perks, and each level costs more energy, but also grants bigger and bigger bonuses. Maxing out any single perk will cost you 24,250 energy, so it can get very expensive. The Blademaster has access to damage resistance, which grants resistance to all types of damage, very effective. Movement speed, which just increases how quickly you walk and roadie run by a considerable amount. Melee bleed damage, which is stupidly overpowered and makes this class really menacing. Any melee hits cause increasing amounts of bleeding damage with this perk. Make the most out of this if you plan on going for a melee build. The last perk is health regeneration, which just increases how quickly your health returns once you stop taking damage. This perk is a little bit wasted on the Blademaster in my opinion, as the class already has so much forced health regeneration as it is. Anyway, those are the perks, and I've got all the values and costs for all these perks as well. If you need to pause the video to look through these, go ahead. With everything else covered, it's time to look at some builds for the Blademaster. I've only got 2 builds for this class. A close range melee build and a slightly less effective ranged build. Let's start with the melee build first. Here are your skill cards. Blade Dancer is by far one of the best you can take for this build, giving you even more damage on melee strikes. This card may not necessarily be needed for lower difficulties, but by the time you have this card, you should be able to run the Blademaster on Inconceivable, or at least Master. Thrill of the Hunt is up next, purely for the forced healing it provides, and obviously the damage resistance is nice as well. Once you've got a few points into melee bleed damage, you can pretty much keep this card active at all times. Plus, it doesn't have to just be enemies you cause bleeding to. Teammates' bleeds also activate this card. Shock Chain is here to increase your crowd control when using your Electro Blade, but it also has an overpowered synergy with the melee bleed damage perk as well. The Shock Chain Lightning will cause bleeding damage to enemies that it hits, and enemies don't have to be that close for this to work. Every time the Chain Lightning hits a new enemy, it'll be stunned, bleeding, and passing that chain onto more nearby enemies. This is super overpowered, do not overlook this. Brawler is next for the flat increase to melee damage this provides. The last slot is once again your choice, but I would like to give you my options. Ambush can be used here to get your Electro Blade back faster, even though the base cooldown isn't that long in my opinion. On the Flank and Nasher Mastery could be used as well to supplement your damage with ballistics. Just make sure you know which one you are using. You don't want to waste your time getting behind enemies if you have Nasher Mastery on. Nimble is a decent option if you want to pair it with increased movement speed and zoom around the map as quickly as you can. Finally, Shock Shield is my last recommendation, just for the extra survivability it offers when you are in a blood crazed state to use your ultimate. In terms of perks, I would take melee bleed damage and movement speed first, follow this up with damage resistance and take health regeneration last. You're going to want to get into enemies' faces, dealing as much bleed damage as you can, then let them bleed or activate your ultimate and decimate the map. Make sure you don't get stuck on the opposite side of the map with your ultimate, unless you have a combat medic or jack to back you up. The next build I've got for you focuses on being a bit more ranged using the following cards. Brutal Claw is the only ranged damage boost we have as the Blademaster, but the weapon takes a little bit of getting used to. Luckily we also start with this weapon as this class, but the long reload, jamming feature and small ammo pool are a little bit annoying. On the Flank is also here to improve your damage. This is especially useful against matriarchs, but if you do get to shoot something in the back, you will do a lot more damage. Energy Surge and mid-range deflection are here for survivability, generating stim and taking less damage from close to mid-ranged enemies, more effective against grenadiers and embargoes. You do have an option slot, but not much that will go here. Nasher Mastery or Brawler can both be used here to help deal with enemies that get too close. Nasher Mastery may be the slightly better choice here as it pairs with On the Flank as well. Short range deflection could also be used to give you that damage resistance from 0 to 5 meters, unless you plan on staying at least more than 5 meters away at all times. The choice is yours. For perks, you're going to want to take damage resistance and health regeneration first, just to keep you that little bit healthy and alive for the fight. Movement speed and melee bleed damage can be taken. You may be fairly stationary with this build, but they may be useful later on. If you manage to get a veteran in your game, their Living Legend is great, just for those easy headshots, and a Tactician can also be a decent option since they help generate ammo for you. But that is everything, builds and all, for the Blademaster. We do have one last thing to cover, and that is the cosmetic you get for maxing this class out and getting to level 20. You should be seeing on screen the Heroic Venom weapon skin for the Claw.
Nice! We should secure that energy tap.
Blademaster is by far my favourite melee class for Gears 5. It does suffer from a lack of build diversity like the rest of the melee classes, but there's only so many ways you can punch an enemy in the face. Try this class out, let me know what you guys think of these builds in the comments below. The next class I want to make a video on will be Jack, so if you're interested in seeing that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I would love to grow this channel to 500 subscribers before the end of the year. But as always, I hope you have an awesome day, and I will see you in the next one, Gears.